Good morning, it's Thursday, July 9th, and we're going to continue our discussion on action and duty with a prompt from the Daily Stoic which reads, am I on the philosopher's path or just winging it? So I've spoken before about the evolution in the role that philosophy has played in my life over the last 3 years. First, it was just an early curiosity. Then it became an experimental tool for my time spent in the gym. And then after seeing the obvious benefits, I began to adopt and implement some of the foundational principles of Stoicism into my personal life. The more I immersed myself in the teachings and the more faith that I put in that framework, the simpler my life became and the more satisfaction I found. But what's interesting though, is that despite the improvements I saw in those areas of my life, I was still extremely cautious and conscious of keeping my philosophical leanings out of my work persona. I think some of that can be attributed to having worked 10 years in a mature, established company where the status quo is so firmly entrenched. And I don't necessarily mean this in an Aldous Huxley sense, but we're conditioned to think, behave, and make decisions in a certain way. It's the same as anywhere that societal norms are allowed to take root. It's just easier to conform. It creates less friction. Creating friction requires either recklessness or conviction. And that conviction comes from confidence that you have the tools available to handle any situation. And that's where philosophy comes in. And with enough time spent testing the water, I decided to open my professional door and allow philosophy to enter. At first, it was just in how I framed the problems that I saw in my mind, and then the perspectives that I used to develop solutions. Once again, I became very experimental. I still wasn't sure that I could marry this 2,000-year-old set of writings to my 21st century job. But the results I began to see were indisputable. As before, everything became so much simpler. There was very little waffling or debating on decisions. I was able to see the path forward much more clearly. My relationships and the manner which I interacted with my colleagues improved as I became more empathetic and tolerant. The quality of my output surged as I demanded even more from myself. There would be no room for excuses, blaming, or complaining. I experienced precisely what the Israeli general Herzl Halevi did when he said, "People used to tell me that business administration is for the practical life and philosophy is for the spirit. Through the years, I found it is exactly the opposite. I used philosophy much more practically." And so it continued as I transitioned from embracing philosophy as a worker to embracing it as a leader. My speech patterns and my messaging shifted. I began to structure discussions on corporate strategy around Stoic principles, even if I didn't explicitly call it out as such. I challenged the conventional approaches, and I know it created friction. People weren't used to someone expressing some of those thoughts and orientations. And then the bottom of the oil and gas market fell out, and there was panic. So once again, I leaned even harder into the supportive architecture of philosophy to help me make sense of how to help the business move forward. I saw the calming and reorienting effect that the teachings of Marcus, Seneca, and Epictetus had on others, even without their knowing it. So that led me to the interviews that I had a few weeks ago, where I mentioned that I was asked to prepare a presentation on any topic of my choosing. So what do you think I chose? I've got about 100 days worth of material to choose from here. So essentially, I provided a roadmap forward for the business to help guide us out of this downturn, structured under the 3 Stoic principles of perception, will, and action. Perception, the ability to see things clearly and objectively. Will, the willingness to endure and accept that which we cannot change. And action, to selflessly do what we can, where we can, when we can. So how is that reviewed, or how is that received by the interview panel? Well, we'll find out tomorrow. Have a great one. Bye.